Prior to the Home Rule Act, the District of Columbia was basically treated as a colony. We had 3 commissioners. It wasn't through elected representatives. It was through those appointed by the federal government.
That left us as the only jurisdiction in the United States that it didn't have any control over its local affairs.
Even for kids, we understood that something was wrong with this picture. Couldn't put it into words, but we had no say in that city in which we were living.
I was born in Washington, D.C. I grew up in Washington, D.C. I was well aware that it was the venue for the political process, and we were irrelevant, marginalized players in that process. And so home rule meant we had some measure of dignity and participation in the American experience, so it meant a lot.
We're celebrating because there were a group of people who fought hard to get us home rule. Home rule to me is like what people feel like in the state of California, like what they feel like in the state of Texas, like what they feel like right 2 miles across the bridge.
It gives us the same rights and privileges that other citizens have. Unfortunately, ours is limited.
Every time I have to write out that check for my federal income tax, I say to myself, I'm paying taxes where I can't even get to vote on where my tax money is going to get spent. So we're still second-class citizens paying first-class taxes.
So the status quo is not acceptable. We need to have control over all aspects of our government to improve our society, the community that's Washington, D.C., and we do not have that now.
The civil rights movement was a movement for people trying to get their due rights and to have justice. That's basically what home rule is about, too.
The general thrust of both the movement, home rule movement, and the Civil Rights Bill was to empower people in their governance.
If you look at the history of D.C., it's been a history of civil rights, and it's been a story of the case for self-determination of a people in a city, and the story is still untold. There is a lot of work to be done.
But it took individuals in Washington, D.C. fighting and fighting and fighting and pushing to get Congress to approve the Home Rule Act in 1974.
Walter Washington, who became the first mayor, was the real hero of home rule.
All my colleagues were heroes. The whole council were. I mean, really, because they all in their way brought their community activism into play and being elected and being there while we were trying to transition to this new government. So they were heroes.
And so when you look at the civil rights pioneers, they were very clear on the message. They were unafraid, but more importantly, they made it a national issue. And I think when home rule becomes a national issue, that's when you'll see change right here in the District of Columbia.
Julius Hobson did call home rule home fool, and there was something to it. But he was quite correct. At the end of the day, Congress still can checkmate what we do. In many ways, it was home fool, but we had something and we ran with it.
And the question is, how do we take what he said then, home rule, home fool, and create something that's better for my kids and my grandkids?
A city that had a junk bond rating toward investment grade rating, toward bankrupt, to highest cash reserves per capita of any government in the United States. That's a sense of the district's resilience.
The city has been strong. It's kept its finances. We balance budgets, and we're moving forward. And the population is growing because it's a great town to be in.
I will not yield, sir. The District of Columbia has spent 206 years yielding.
All Americans should care. Well, they should care that they have a capital city that doesn't have the same rights that everybody else in the United States has.
You don't want to have people in your country who are disenfranchised and do not have a right to influence their lives.
So there is something un-American about that.
This is the nation's capital. This is their capital. This is a reflection of who we are as a democracy.
And more importantly, Our kids are sent off to war just like everybody else's kids, and we can't even vote on whether we go to war or not. That's not fair, and that's not right, and so we ought to change that.
But being in office made me realize nothing shy of statehood could possibly serve our interests. You had to have more than just having 2 senators, you had to have sovereignty. The reason you're in this situation is it's the best kept secret about how these 700,000 citizens are treated. That is why you cannot get a vote now that reflects the will of the people on gun safety. You cannot get a vote now that reflects the will of the people on reproductive freedom. You cannot get a vote now that reflects the will of the people on climate change. If we had the District of Columbia, then we would have a Senate that reflects the will of America. So our issue is not just our issue, it's an American issue.
Well, on the 50th anniversary of Home Rule, we have every reason to celebrate, but until we become the 51st state, we will not have the same equal rights that other residents of the United States of America have.
And so taxation without representation was wrong. When our founding fathers said it, it's still wrong today. I expect it will be cleared up by the time we get 50 years down the road.
And when you see bills introduced in Congress to abolish home rule, you see some elected official from some other jurisdiction trying to make some brownie points in their own state.
We, local officials and the citizens of the district, have to be vigilant to assure that these efforts don't gain any traction.
Home rule is very fragile. It's fragile as actually our democracy is at this point in time. And we need to be vigilant and strong and try to keep our eyes on the prize.
Retaining what we have is going to be a challenge. We are going to be put to the test in the next 4 years.
I look for a city that has full self-determination, where we play a full role like legislators in Paris or Berlin or London play in their national affairs, where the mayor of Washington, D.C. and leaders in Washington, D.C. are also real national leaders because we have that voice.
Home rule has served us well, and it has allowed us to really hear what the people of this community want and think. We have every reason to be proud, but we also have every reason to be determined to have the full participation in the American experience and demand statehood.